A single mother and her young son vanished on an American highway in 2016. No crash. No witnesses. Police quietly moved on, assuming she ran away. 5 years later, a car was found buried in the desert, with her remains inside. But her son was missing. And what investigators uncovered next reopened everything. In 2016, a single mother and her young son vanished on an ordinary American highway. No crash. No goodbye. No trace. Their disappearance was briefly headline news, another tragic mystery in a country crisscrossed by endless roads. And then, just like that, they faded into silence. But 5 years later, during a routine environmental survey in the Arizona desert, workers uncovered something buried beneath hardened clay, something that had been hidden deliberately. What investigators found reopened a case that was never supposed to be solved. Because this wasn't just a disappearance. It was a carefully controlled crime, one involving patience, manipulation, and a truth so disturbing it forced detectives to rethink what survival really means. Before we begin, if you're drawn to true crime stories where justice arrives late but undeniable, subscribe, turn on notifications, and watch until the very end. Because the final revelation in this case doesn't just change how the crime is understood. It changes who the victim really was. On August 12, 2016, Marianne Holloway woke before sunrise in her Albuquerque apartment. The air was already warm. Desert heat crept in early that summer, pressing against the windows like a warning. Marianne moved quietly so she wouldn't wake her son, Evan, curled beneath a thin blanket on the living room couch. Their apartment was nearly empty, half-packed boxes stacked against the walls, labeled in black marker, books, clothes, kitchen. This move wasn't impulsive. It was necessary. At 36, Marianne had run out of second chances in New Mexico. Her teaching contract had ended. Her divorce had drained her savings. And Flagstaff, Arizona offered a short-term position and something she hadn't felt in years: hope. Evan, 10 years old now, watched her from the couch. "You ready?" she asked gently. He nodded, clutching his backpack. Inside were a sketchbook, colored pencils, and the asthma inhaler he never went anywhere without. By 7:14 a.m., they pulled onto Interstate 40, heading west. It was supposed to be a 6-hour drive. They never made it. The last confirmed sighting of Marianne and Evan Holloway came from a gas station outside Winslow, Arizona. Surveillance footage showed Marianne buying bottled water and jerky. Evan lingered by the candy rack, holding up a chocolate bar for permission. She nodded. He smiled. At 3:52 p.m., their blue Ford Taurus merged back onto the highway. When Marianne failed to check in with her sister that evening, concern quickly escalated. By morning, her phone went straight to voicemail. Police initiated a missing persons report within 24 hours. Search teams combed nearby desert washes. Helicopters traced the highway corridor. Social media spread their photos nationwide. But there was nothing. No abandoned vehicle. No crash debris. No financial activity. It was as if the road had swallowed them whole. By October 2016, investigators quietly floated a theory. Voluntary disappearance. Marianne was under stress. Divorced. Unemployed. Relocating. But those closest to her rejected it outright. Marianne had left behind her birth certificate, Evan's medical records, and every childhood photo she owned. She hadn't withdrawn money. She hadn't contacted anyone. Most importantly, she would never abandon Evan. By 2018, the case went cold. Until the desert spoke. In May 2021, a federal land reclamation project began near a forgotten service road north of Page, Arizona. When drilling equipment struck metal 6 feet underground, workers expected scrap. Instead, they uncovered a vehicle, buried nose down, intentionally placed. The license plate confirmed it instantly. Marianne Holloway's Ford Taurus. Inside the trunk lay skeletal remains of an adult female. Her wrists were bound. The medical examiner confirmed she died from blunt force trauma. But there were no remains of a child. Evan was gone. During forensic processing, detectives opened Evan's backpack. Inside was a spiral notebook, sealed inside layered plastic bags. The first entry was dated August 13, 2016. One day after the disappearance. Mom says we have to stay here until the car is fixed. The man is nice, but she doesn't trust him. The entries continued for months. Evan wrote about a locked room, about being told his mother was sleeping, about being warned never to use his real name. One sentence stopped investigators cold. He says I'm lucky because boys don't usually get kept alive. The property where the Taurus was buried once belonged to Calvin Rourke, a self-employed mechanic who ran a roadside towing service until his death in 2018. He lived alone. No criminal history. No close relationships. But a search of his property revealed a sealed basement room. Soundproofed. Ventilated. Measured for a child. Scratches lined the walls. Height markings etched into wood. Evan had lived there. Ground-penetrating radar revealed additional burial sites. Women. Teenagers. Travelers. But Evan's case was different. He was the only child kept alive long enough to document captivity. His final entry read, "He says Mom wouldn't want me if she knew what I did to survive." There were no entries after March 2017. No body. In late 2022, a genealogical DNA database flagged a partial match. A man in his early 30s living in Idaho submitted DNA after a minor arrest. His birth records were incomplete, but the match was undeniable. The missing boy from 2016 had survived. When confronted, the man confirmed everything. He was Evan Holloway. Calvin Rourke had released him at a Nevada truck stop with false documents and a warning. Never tell anyone who you were. Evan complied. He survived foster care, changed his name, buried the past, until the car was found. Marianne Holloway had fought. That fight saved her son. She never made it home, but Evan lived. And for years, no one knew. Until now. This case reminds us that survival doesn't always look like rescue. Sometimes it looks like silence. Sometimes it looks like compliance. And sometimes it looks like a child doing whatever it takes to stay alive, then carrying that weight for the rest of their life. Marianne Holloway didn't survive the road, but her resistance changed the outcome. Her son lived. If stories like this matter to you, like, subscribe, and share this video so these names are never forgotten. Justice doesn't always arrive on time, but when it does, it deserves to be heard.